Now we're back from executive session. We're going to move on with the interviews. First, we'll talk briefly again about the process. Today, we have 3 more interviews to complete. They'll all be done in public session. Process at that point, the board will have completed interviews for 7 potential members of the board. All the members of the board have a score sheet. They'll be asked to rank the board members 1 through 7, 1 being their first choice. The votes will then be tabulated by Betty and myself. After that, we'll announce the top 3 vote getters, and then the board will begin discussion regarding those candidates, and hopefully we'll entertain a motion and have a new board member by the end of this evening. Mr. Whittington, anything to add to that?
No, I think we're fine.
Okay. All right. Mr. Tonich? Oh, Mr. Schrader. Where's Mr. Tonich? I'm sorry.
No,
Come on.
Schroeder.
Oh, I thought Tony was first. My bad.
Yep, Mr. Schrader.
I'm sorry, Mr. Schrader. All right. Thank you for being here today. The board constructed a 10 interview question process. Everybody's been asked the same 10 questions. We're going to go around the table, ask you the questions. You're welcome to answer the question. Let us know how you think on what we're asking. These are issues that are facing the fire district right now.
Sure.
So we're looking to see what your feelings are on some of our current issues. We'll go through our 10 questions. We've got 25 minutes. We'll see if there are any follow-up questions from the board, and we'll go from there.
All right.
Okay. So our first question today, you are on the SFD board, and it's time to develop the annual budget. You're met with a dilemma. Based on the data provided to you by the finance director, you need to vote to either cut the budget or increase the levy to maintain the current level of services. Which way do you vote?
It really depends on where the money's going to be spent, what the level of importance is, how it's ranked. Is it has to do with safety? Does it have to do with salaries? It has to do with equipment. There's a lot of information you got to have before you can put a yes or no vote out for something like that.
Okay, agreed. One of the components of that question refers to current level of services. What is your opinion of the current level of services provided to the district by SFD?
Well, right now, it looks like the current level of services are pretty good in most areas. It seems to me there's some areas that it could be improved on, and maybe there's other areas that the level of services are maybe a little bit more than necessary. Again, having that information is going to be necessary before you make a decision on whether you're going to increase levies or increase the budget, and where that money is going to go and how it's going to affect basically your customers, which is the people in the district.
Okay. I'll stop there unless anybody has any follow-up questions. Okay.
Okay, Mike. Fire and EMS services are provided out of 5 stations in our district. There has been some recent talk about the disparity in the numbers of calls run by each station on a monthly basis. For instance, Station 5 in the Canyon gets fewer calls than Station 1 or Station 3. If you were a board member and asked about this by a member of the media, would you respond by suggesting SFD shut down Station 5 and redeploy those first responders, or keep Station 5 open?
Station 5 is the one up in the canyon. I think Station 5 should remain open and where it is. There's no reason I can see, based on limited knowledge right now, that should be shut down.
Now, one of the points that this question gets to, you're aware that the station there is on a lease that's owned by the Garland family, and it's going to be terminated at the end of 2 more years. Is that right, Chief? Okay, so we've got 2 to 3 years to come up with a plan. We're going to have to move Station 5. So part of that question is that if you agree with the presence in the canyon, there's going to be a cost involved with keeping a presence in the canyon because we won't have a station at some point.
Well, I think making a decision like that before sitting down with the Garlands is really premature. And my understanding is not 100% of that land belongs to the Garlands, only part of it. But again, I don't have all those details. But it would be hard for me to think that the Garlands, who are prominent members of this community, and considering the amount of land that they own and how big a piece of property that is, would arbitrarily, cancel a lease. And here again, I have not seen the lease, so I don't know how much force and effect they actually have in canceling it.
Okay, but you believe we should maintain a presence in the canyon?
Well, I think we not only maintain a presence in the canyon, I think that the abandoned garage or station further up the canyon should have something in it. So we can, we can have first responders on fires a lot quicker, and then have the main folks come up out of Station 5 to support that effort. Because it's quite a ways up there, and especially now when you're in the summertime, when you got people parking all over the roads, you can't even get an engine or something up and down that road, 89A up there in the canyon.
Any other follow-up questions or comments?
Okay. Mr. Schroeder, the finance director who works annually with members of management to develop a budget to present to the board each spring. As a board member, how do you see yourself being effective in the budgeting process?
Well, you have to review what is currently being done. You have to review the different components of a budget. You know, what are those components? Are they for maintenance? Are they for salaries? Are they for, expansion, equipment replacement, leases, and whatever? You have to have that information before you can make a decision, and maybe a reallocation of funds in a budget. Mm-hmm. Who's giving us that information, how accurate it is, and should there be follow-up on those specific components, so a decision can be made. I mean, just because somebody comes up and says, we need this, we need that, if you're not out in the field, and if you're not checking it out, if you're not doing something, if you're not relying on your own personal experience in these areas, then you can't make a decision on a yes or no on a budget item. So it's a process. I don't have to tell you it's a process, because you go through it every year. And we go through it in the business that I'm in, as the audit committee chairman. For a $4 billion company, we have budgets, and we question the people bringing those budgets to us, and and also the targets and what they intend to achieve with the money that they're going to spend. So it's all part of the process, but it really is not that different when it comes to reviewing budgets and signing off on them.
Thank you.
Might you have any local or outside involvement with individuals, businesses, or agencies which could be considered a conflict of interest, nepotism, etc., with your functioning on the SFD Fire Board?
No.
Okay, so we learned during the bond process that there's support for the district from the residents. How would you go about garnering further support and making that support known to the public?
I think dissipating information to the public, letting them know what the options are, what the trade-offs are, showing the public that there are ways to do things more efficiently, make sure that their money is spent in a manner that is giving them the most bang for the buck, if you will. I think that's what they want to see. They want to know that they're going to be protected. They want to know that the guys out there and the gals are going to have the good equipment and good training. But there has to be a cost that's put to that, and they have to understand what those costs are, and if there are trade-offs, what the trade-offs are. I think public opinion is very important in this process, and we need to pay attention to that. And we also need to pay attention to how those dollars are spent for the public, so we don't waste taxpayer dollars. That's a critical part of getting the public support.
Okay, any follow-up questions? Nope.
Okay, Mike, community risk management oversees both the fire marshal and fire inspector's duties, as well as the public education activities in our community. Our efficiencies in CRM have increased over the last year. However, there are further efforts needed in inspections and public education. How important is fire prevention in the scope of the fire district core services?
Well, I think fire protection is very important, and we've had to, at the airport, obviously have interface with the inspector on various, items that we have up there, from fire extinguishers to other processes that we get educated on. So that's very important in the public area. I'd like to see personally more community involvement. I'd like to see more of a volunteer environment for standard, maybe non-critical things, the checking of smoke alarms or basic inspections that a fire inspector could work with. I think if you had, I think there's a lot of people in this community that love to have a SFD shirt on and be trained in those areas, and you could really get some public involvement in that. And if we have that, then we're not looking at taking our valuable firefighters and putting them out on these tasks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Schroeder, Sedona Fire first responders have worked hard since 1978 to provide emergency medical services to the members of the Sedona community. Medical transports today result in significant income to the Sedona Fire District. There has been discussion about privatizing or outsourcing our medical transports. What is your position on this?
My position is to analyze the situation and get bids and quotes from people who provide this service, and then put that against what we could do today. What is the efficiency of what we do today? How expensive is it? Can we save money? Can we get the same level of service? You know, we have environments all over the United States where this is private. This is a private function. I had an issue with my wife out in Hawaii, and with a broken collarbone, and got the transport and all that kind of stuff, and got the bill out of Los Angeles. So it really depends on the efficiency of an operation, and can they provide what we are used to having here with the same number of ambulances or transport vehicles? Where are they located? Are they co-located? I mean, we need to look at this environment. You know, what does it really cost us? I believe you know, most of our runs around here are for medical and emergency purposes, not necessarily for fire. So I think it deserves some very careful analysis and proposals, and then weighing that against what we currently do.
Okay, thank you.
Whereas the current budget and anticipated 2019 budget both included funds set aside for future capital expenses, we're aware that a more aggressive capital funding plan is needed. How would you budget for that expense while maintaining current service level?
Well, first of all, we have to take a look at what the budget is, what our current income is, you know, via the money we receive from the billings that we do, and of course the tax base. Once we do that, we have to take a look, and is it enough? Are the dollars allocated properly? Do we have to change the mill rate? Do we have to increase our revenues on a temporary basis so long-term we can bring them back down again? What kind of money are we spending on communications equipment and maintenance and the other items? Is the equipment mix that we have proper? We do have the opportunity, and we have said so, you know, in our previous challenge to the bond issues specifically, that a mill rate change may be needed. You know, if the district is short of funds, if there's things that are lacking and we're going to have to fix it, it's going to have to be paid one way or the other. And whether it's through mill rate or some other way, I don't know, but you can't not raise funds if it's necessary and justified. And I don't know how much is justified. I don't know to what level, but that's the responsibility of the board to find out and to ask those questions and to pull from the resources that you have, or every board member has, from a current experience, but more importantly, past experience. You know, I've built buildings in my life. You know, I built them a long time ago, and they're as good as the day that I built them. I've been in the communications business. There's a lot of things that we can do and we should be looking at, rather than just throwing dollars at something, and maybe or maybe not, the results are what we expect based on the taxpayer dollars that we're spending. So you can't just come in blindly and say yes or no to something. That doesn't work that way.
Well, and I think the question gets to, we know we've got capital needs coming up. There's no
Sure we do.
two ways about it. And so we're looking at all options as far as what there's going to be. The bond was one option, pay-go lease purchase. There's all sorts of ways to accomplish what we need to accomplish. So I think that's the crux of the question, is looking.
Well, you have to have an open mind. All right, that's the bottom line. You can't go in predetermined saying, hey, this is what we're going to spend, no matter what happens as a result of that. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way in business. It doesn't work that, in a business, you got your shareholders that you're responsible for, responsible to. In this environment, you have the taxpayers that you're responsible to, and you have to balance the needs against, the revenue, and then you got to prioritize what you got to spend your money on. I mean, it's not rocket science to approach any kind of expenditures, and whether it be capital improvement or expenses or maintenance. It's all the same.
I believe it's mine, that was yours. This position's up for election in November 2018. If selected, would you consider campaigning to maintain your seat in the upcoming election?
I would.
Okay, last question. Why do you feel you would be the most qualified candidate for this board position?
Well, I don't know if I'm the most qualified candidate, because I haven't heard the other interviews. And, I know some of the other folks a little bit, but, my background is business. I've been involved with building call center, taking care of 400,000 customers on a repeat basis, servicing dealers. I've been in the equipment business. I've bought trucks and equipment and built buildings, and have a very broad personal experience in pretty much everything that goes on in the fire district. And the budget here is actually pretty small. It's, $17 million, is that pretty close?
16 and change, yeah.
Yeah, 16 and change, but everything's scalable. You scale it up, you scale it down. Our budgets that I deal with today are for a $4 billion company. So, but the core components are still the same. You still have the same needs, you still have the same concerns. We have repeat customers today. I had repeat customers in my business. I had dealers that I had to take care of. I had 10 warehouses that I built or refurbished and supplied goods and services to my dealers so they could take care of my repeat customers. I designed IT programs. I managed my own IT department. So it's, I think I bring a lot to the table.
Okay. Any final questions or any further comments? All right. We appreciate your interest and your time today.
Okay,
Thanks very much.
thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Since I missed the memo, Mr. Tonsich is next, correct? Okay. We can wait or we can proceed. I'm fine with proceeding. The board's fine, and if you're fine to go ahead.
I'm good.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. My reputation precedes me, I'm afraid, but don't let that scare you.
All right. Well, thank you for being here. As you heard, we'll be going through 10 questions, the same 10 for every interview. Every interview. We may have some follow-up questions, and you may as well. We'll just go from there, and we'll take 25 minutes from now.
Okay.
We'll go ahead and get started. So I'll give you the first question. You're on the SFD board, and it's time to develop the annual budget. You're met with a dilemma. Based on the data provided to you by the finance director, you need to vote to either cut the budget or increase the tax levy to maintain our current level of services. Which way do you vote?
Well, I would hope that before I got to that decision, I would be aware of what's going on in the fire district. As Chief Kazin would tell you, I've been interested in the district for quite some time, both in getting information and input from him, from my observations, and I also, once upon a time, had a fiance that worked for the fire district and was aware of some of the internal activities and operations that go on in this place. I would, before I made a decision on that, want to make sure that everything was as efficient as possible. In most public organizations, people tend to be And I'm not sure that it's exactly the case now, but probably that people tend to be protective of their spending, because if they don't spend it all this year, they won't have the money next year. And I'm not looking at it from a position of protecting the organization, I'm looking at it from a position of protecting the public. Ideally, we provide services, and it's the most efficient, reasonable services that we can provide. Now, there might be things in the budget, and I would be aware of them if I was a fire board member, that are, while they might be nice to have, and they might make us safer, they might not be essential. I'd want to know everything about that. I wouldn't just make a decision randomly, no, we can't spend it, or yes, we can, because the budget director says we can, because we spent this money last year. The nature of, I've been speaking with the Sedona Police Chief, trying to get an idea for that, because I will be mayor of Sedona. And I've spoken with Chris rather extensively, and it's the nature of the people in that position that want to do the best to protect, you know, and spend as much as possible. That's their job. That's where they come from. That's what they feel. My position as either a mayor or a fire board member is to make sure I get the most bang for the buck. So when someone approaches me and says, this is absolutely what we need, I'd say, that's nice. I'm going to look into it. I'm going to know. I'm not going to guess. I'm not going to take their word for it, in all honesty. It's just the nature of them. They want to protect their fiefdom. They want more manning. They want their job. They want their pay raises. All of those things. You know, we've got two people, or a number of people. One is our customers, and oddly enough, our customers are the citizens of Sedona. You know, we want them to be safe. We want them to be protected. We want them to feel safe. And then we've got the other side that are the various firefighters, and that would like a bigger gym, would like a newer fire station, would like nicer private bedrooms, would like a bigger TV, would like better weight equipment. Now, whether those things are essential or just desired are two different things. I am familiar with organizations, along with a whole lot of business experience. I was also a union member for 27 years. I know what union members ask for. You know, and it's a game, it's a negotiation. So when someone presents me something like, I absolutely gotta have it, I wanna know. I don't want it to be a guess. I don't want to accept blindly that I got to have it. I'm sure that Sedona would be safer if we had a water drop 747. I guarantee we'd be safer if we had a water drop 747. We might be not quite as safe as if we had water drop helicopters, and that might be in the budget as a need. Is it essential? No. I come at it from, you know, when I first moved here, we had a volunteer fire department. We're somewhat well advanced from that position now, and there's something in between from gold-plated, and, you know, I don't want to cut services, I don't want anyone to be unsafe. But, you know, when you've got, just like the police chief of Sedona, he tells me things, and it's like, okay, this is what you want, this is what you're doing as police chief, and what's your situation now? And his situation is nowhere near what he's providing for a police chief. Just to give you an example, and I wouldn't say this to him, whether it's being broadcast or not. You know, he lives in the village, he's got sheriff response time. So at night in the village, there's no sheriffs. So, but he's willing to live with that. Now, but when he's in Sedona, he wants 2 officers and a supervisor on. So as police chief of Sedona, he wants something else. Now, as a fire board member, I want to balance it between maybe the nothing that he has in the village and, you know, 2 people and a supervisor, which I think is probably excessive. But he'll tell me it's necessary. He'll give me all the justifications. And so will these people that are presenting this budget. We need this because, and I'm not going to accept it. I'm going to make sure I know. It's not going to be, I've seen enough, you know. Chris, I was having breakfast with fairly regularly, and asking him questions, trying to learn as much as I could. And maybe it's something I wouldn't be able to do as a board member because it might violate the open meeting law, but I could as a citizen. And Chris was always very professional, always very forthcoming, and he still is. He's answered emails for me even within the last few months. But you know, to give you one example, you send out an ambulance and a fire truck, and because it's safer. That was Chris's response. It's safer, it's more efficient. City of LA sends out an ambulance with 2 men. I'm familiar with the tests these firefighters have to pass, and if 2 young firefighters can't handle a gurney on a regular basis, then we got the wrong firefighters, because that's what they have to do to pass the firefighter's exam. So I might look at what's being spent. Now, if we get a 400-pounder and you got to call it the second truck, then you call it the second truck. But to send out 2 trucks that's not an efficiency. So I'm going to look at all your efficiencies before I say yes or no. And chances are of me rubber stamping something is not good. They will, if they can prove it to me, and it'll have to be proof. Show me. explain to me. I'll do research, not only from what they say, because that's a problem with a lot of, it's a problem with the Sedona City Council. The management says that we need it, and they agree. Well, that may not be the case, and I'm gonna make sure that it is the case before I spend someone else's money. I'm gonna spend the taxpayers' money like it's mine, because it is mine.
Okay.
Okay, we have 10 questions, just so you know.
Yeah.
Okay, second question. Fire and EMS services are provided out of 5 stations in our district. There has been some recent talk about the disparity in the number of calls run by each station on a monthly basis. For instance, Station 5 in the Canyon gets fewer calls than Station 1 or Station 3. If you were a board member and asked about this by a member of the media, would you respond by suggesting SFD shut down Station 5 and redeploy those first responders, or keep Station 5 open?
I would keep Station 5 open and consider closing one of the other stations that is underutilized. The Chapel Station, I think, gets 1 call a day on average, and that's way underutilized, and it's within 5 minutes of 2 other stations, so that was something I fought before it was built.
Okay.
Okay. All right, question number 3. The finance director works annually with members of management to develop a budget to present to the board each spring. As a board member, how do you see yourself being effective in the budgeting process?
Well, by having as much knowledge as possible. I think I covered that a lot in the first question, so rather than repeating myself, but yes, I want to know. It's my money. I'm going to spend everybody in town's money like it's my own. And I'm very efficient, I'm very effective, I don't like cheap, but I'm not going to waste it. I'm not going to allow anyone to, I feel that if I allow that, I'm violating my fiduciary responsibility of why I'm involved in a civic organization. I'm not doing this because I want power or recognition. I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do.
Might you have any local or outside involvement with individuals, businesses, or agencies which could be considered a conflict of interest, nepotism, etc., with your functioning on SFD's fire board?
No, my daughter is employed as a lawyer in Phoenix, and I have no other relatives that I could even think about hiring, so I think we're probably good that way. I have no current involvement with anyone.
Okay. We learned during the bond process that there's support from the district, from the residents. How would you go about garnering further support and making that support known to the public?
Well, to kind of twist your question, there obviously wasn't enough support because you lost. So you need to communicate why, and there's a lot of things that I would want to be whenever I run into somebody. Obviously, I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about this stuff. It just seems to be the nature of things. And when I run into someone, I want to be able to justify exactly why. I don't want any question. And once again, we have the discrepancy between what the chief and the firefighters might like to have in an ideal world. And if we were the federal government, we could print our own money without any debt, then we would. But we've got to tax people for it. And the other consideration, it's a really big consideration, is there seems to be a perception that everyone in Sedona is rich, and I know I'm not. I'm on a fixed income, I got Social Security and pension, and I don't want to go back to work. And if things keep progressing like they are, I'm going to have to go back to work to live here or move. So I want to make sure that before I allow taxes to be raised, I want to make sure they're absolutely necessary, and I'll be able to go out and sell the taxes, like you guys. Obviously it failed, you guys didn't sell it well enough, that's life. So you need to go out there and sell why and why it's essential, and I don't think that people see it now. So there was some support, but obviously not enough, and I'm not the only one that sees 2 fire trucks, a fire truck and an ambulance go out on a call, and they ask why. I've been asked that. I get questions, I get a lot of the why questions, and I'm not even involved. Why is this, why is that? And I haven't even presented myself as being involved. So wait till that happens, and I'm gonna get a whole lot more why, but I wanna be able to answer, yes, the chief says we need this, and the chief is operating from his perspective, and that's the type of people that you're gonna have, but our job is not to make sure the chief's happy, it's to make sure our citizens are happy and protected, so.
Okay.
Okay, number 6. Community risk management oversees both the fire marshal and fire inspectors' duties as well as the public education activities in our community. Our efficiencies in CRM have increased over the last year. However, there are further efforts needed in inspections and public education. How important is fire prevention in the scope of the fire district core services?
I think it's essential. And I think one way to achieve that, as Mike said, is to get the citizenship involved. You've got all these retired people that are looking for something to do, and you get them involved, and that's what we did before when we had a volunteer fire department. You see the litter lifters walking around all over the place. You see your gentlemen that aren't making much money for doing this on an hourly rate. You know, if I look at my hourly rate, my daughter says, "Why are you doing this?" It's the right thing to do. So we get those retired people involved, and you'd have to hold them back, you know, or you could hire union firefighters to do that. Or the other thing you could do is you get your firefighters to go out on their off time and plus the fresh, not only at airport days, but just going around, knocking on your door, would you like me to look at your place? It would, you know, that type of thing where they have the time, if they're dressed to be ready to go out on a call, and rather than sitting playing video games or working on the station, they're knocking on doors, would you like us to look at your house? You could have PR, you know, but right now, the people talk about my taxes keep going up, and I don't see where it's going.
Thank you.
Sedona Fire first responders have worked hard since 1978 to provide emergency medical services to the members of the Sedona community. Medical transports today result in significant income to the Sedona Fire District. There has been discussion about privatizing or outsourcing the medical transports. What's your position on this matter?
Well, I would want to make sure that we are doing things as cost effectively as possible. That's my point earlier about the sending out a fire truck and an ambulance. If you had private ambulances and they could do it a lot cheaper, that's something to consider. It's the effectiveness of it, and when you say that it's a revenue source, it brings in money, well, we have to look at that. You know, what the balance, and the other thing is whether we charge the tourists enough, or how much of our calls are for tourists. You know, the safety, particularly for an older population, people want, you know, gold plated, and they want it at their door, and they want it yesterday. There's a balance between that and the old people like myself that can be taxed out of their homes because I'm on a fixed income, you know, and I'm not rich. You know, it wasn't my efforts were in other things rather than making money, as they are today, being here. But you know, we'd have to consider that. You know, Cottonwood seems to survive with it. I don't know whether Camp Verde has a private ambulance. We have a whole bunch of areas in this community that operate on the private ambulance service, and we don't seem to have mass casualties where people are not getting service. We have to look at it and look at the costs. I wouldn't say absolutely, oh yeah, if it's 10 cents cheaper, no, but it's a balance. And you look at if it's 50% cheaper than sending our firefighters out, and then obviously it would have to merit serious consideration. You know, and then they always say, well, you won't get the response time. Well, you know, that's the primary factor. I mean, it doesn't matter how cheap it is if people have to wait an hour and they die, well, and then it was way too expensive. So you look at everything and balance it out, but it's not something you dismiss out of hand because, you know, we have all these firefighters and someone wants a bigger fiefdom and they'd like to have 100 people on their payroll where we could get by with less. So it's definitely something to look at, but it has to be looked at seriously and from a cost and service basis, and I think service first before cost.
Thank you.
Whereas the current budget and anticipated 2019 budget both include funds set aside for future capital expenses, we're aware that a more aggressive capital funding plan is needed. How would you budget for that expense while maintaining current service level?
Well, you know, one of the big things that the capital expenses is your equipment, and previous, which I've objected to strenuously, is having ladder trucks for a town that doesn't have any multi-story buildings. Water goes downhill, so if you don't have any multi-story buildings and you have ladder trucks, the residents are laughing at you. That's what it comes down to. So I think I would make sure that I could justify to the residents why we need this expenditure, and there'd be no doubt if we were justifying it. Not, you know, someone says that we could be safer with that water drop 747, I guarantee it. You know, in a little fire, you know, we could have water drop helicopters up in the airport and we'd be safer too. But, you know, having ladder trucks in a single story or two-story max town makes you a laughing stock and makes people not believe your equipment requests. That's bad optics. You know, one of the things that I made fun of the fire department before, and Chris has straightened it out quite a bit, is, you know, taking pictures of firemen that are, you know, have their trucks parked 150 yards away and out having breakfast at Wildflower was one of the pictures. And then you talk about we need another station for better response time. These guys aren't ready to fight fires, they're out having breakfast, and that's not when they're 2 days on, 4 days off. That's ridiculous. And that's the optics you're fighting when you ask for an increase. And I'm fighting you. You know, if you want me on your side, which is what I'm here to do, you know, that's what we're looking for. But when you ask for more equipment and you say we need a budget for more equipment, and you've got 2 ladder trucks for a single-story town or 2-story town, I'm gonna fight you, and so are other people, and you're not gonna get what you asked for. That's why you lost.
Okay, so this position is up for election in November of 18. If selected, would you consider campaigning to maintain your seat?
No, I'm gonna be mayor next year.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I'm gonna be mayor.
So
I'll be
you,
running for mayor in the fall, and I'll probably have that position.
so you would not be interested in running?
But the advantage of you having me on is they know my fiscal attributes and what I'm looking for, and it's gonna make you guys look more responsible versus someone that might be a yes man that's gonna rubber stamp you, because if you do that, you're gonna get wiped out in the fall. Your call.
All right, last question. Why do you feel you would be the most qualified candidate for this board position?
Well, as I've covered a lot over my responses, I've been interested and involved in Sedona Fire for probably 5-7 years. I have a fairly respected name and position in the community for being fiscally responsible, and I might be able to help you not only increase service, but you know, when you do ask for something, make it look more reasonable, because that's why you lost the election. So, you know, people are very much in favor of me being a mayor, and I could probably help you out for a brief time with your perceptions. And if I get up and say something, people are gonna believe it, because I have a very solid reputation. And, you know, I mentioned at one of the homeowner associations I was running in Sedona, I was running for mayor, and they said, you got our votes, you don't have to say anything else, you know, because they knew me. But you just for an example, one of the other candidates, Steve Stegner, you hire him, you're gonna get creamed. You'll get a yes man now, and next election, it'll be fun to watch. But that's not the wisest thing for you to do if you wanna try and maintain your spending. I'm gonna be reasonable, I'm gonna be tough, but, you know, I'm also not a rubber stamp guy, and I'm not gonna waste any money. So that's the choice you have. And I am a known commodity. I'm not known for being in favor of the radical spending of the fire department. So you're bringing balance onto the board instead of another yes man. That's kind of your choice.
Thank you.
All right, that's almost 25 minutes. I appreciate your time, Doug.
Thank you.
Very much. All right. We okay to keep moving on?
If you give me 2 minutes.
You want 2 minutes? Okay, let's take a couple minutes for the restroom.
I'm good.
You're good?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
I just needed note taken.
Okay. We'll move on then. Mr. Kadar?
Afternoon.
Hi there, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
So you've heard kind of what our format is,
I have.
and so we've got 25 minutes, and we'll just dive right in if that's all right.
I'd like to make an opening statement to Mr. Whittington, if it please the board.
Okay?
Mr. Whittington, I must request that Board Member Ernster be recused from my interview, which means he shall not participate in any questioning or voting, and he must be excused from this room during my interview, as he has demonstrated hostility toward me in his recent board meeting and in his comments directed at me in the June 19th article in the Red Rock News. Therefore, I believe Board Member Ernster will not give me fair consideration on the open board position, and he is obligated to remove himself. I'd like an opinion.
Mr. Chair, I'm not inclined to give a legal opinion to a member of the public. If you want my legal opinion, glad to do it in executive session, otherwise I recommend you move on.
I believe I've already gotten your opinion. Mr. Ernster will not be recusing himself.
Okay. Since Mr. Whittington, you will not honor my request, I will participate in this interview in protest. But be advised, I will be filing a formal complaint against you with the Arizona Bar Association on this matter, as well as your failure and your legal and professional obligation to inform the governing board of Board Member Ernster's conflict of interest with regard to the bond. Let's proceed.
We're going to take a recess. Okay, Mr. Kadar, we'll go ahead and proceed. So we have 10 questions in 25 minutes, just like for all the other candidates. All right. So first question, you're on the SFD board and it's time to develop the annual budget. You're met with a dilemma. Based on the data provided to you by the finance director, you need to vote to either cut the budget or increase the tax levy to maintain our current level of services. Which way do you vote?
The first thing I would ask the budget director to do is to provide a trend analysis for the last 5 years of spending. I'd like to see historically, since it would be my first budget, I'd like to see where the spending is, where it has been, what the anticipation increases are, what the justifications are. I'd also like to see a comparative analysis of fire districts that have fundamentally the same basic structure as the Sedona Fire District, to do a competitive analysis to find out whether or not Sedona has a competitive fire district, because as Tony said it, and I absolutely agree with it, it's other people's money, including my own. So to look at a single budget in a vacuum, I can't do that. I spent the first 10 years of my career working for a very large multinational corporation, the Ford Motor Company, in this very area, and developed my skill set. I continued that in my the remaining part of my career with my second company. So I have a lot of experience in validating budgets. So you just don't look at a single year and try to justify what it is. We would want to look at a trend analysis, we'd want to look at comparative analysis of other fire districts, and we want to continually build that database and look at certain variables so that we could understand how Sedona is spending money. I'll give you a great example. The $600,000 fire engine that was bought. I questioned the chief on that personally. What did we do with the replacement? We stuck it out here why didn't we sell that? There's a great opportunity. Why didn't we sell that engine? The board needs to challenge management every step of the way. We, you, are the advocates for the taxpayers. You don't work for him. You work for us. And that's why I want to be on this board. I want to work for the taxpayers. I want this district to be as efficient, as effective, and as low cost as we can be. But it is efficient and effective. Safety is number one. But cost is an extremely important component in this equation of setting budgets.
Okay.
Okay, Dwight. Question 2. Fire and EMS services are provided out of 5 stations in our district. There has been some recent talk about the disparity in the number of calls run by each station on a monthly basis. For instance, Station 5 in the Canyon gets fewer calls than Station 1 or Station 3. If you were a board member and asked about this by a member of the media, would you respond by suggesting SFD shut down Station 5 and redeploy those first responders, or keep Station 5 open?
I've thought about that because actually Mike Schrader and I went up and toured all the stations, including the inactive station, just to get a sense of what the entire district looked like. And quite honestly, I'm not sure that that station does need to remain open. The idea of potentially, because of our traffic problems, and it's something that this board needs to address with the city and the Chamber of Commerce. This is going to be the number one issue in this city, is how do we provide safety through the fire district with the traffic that we've got, with the road system we've got, and with the tourists. I lived down in the village. It was bumper to bumper from the last roundabout all the way up to the Y. And I watched them try to get one of those big engines. It was a bitch. They had a difficult time moving. But to me, the issue is maybe what we need to do is station, and again, because the vast majority of calls in this district are not fire. They're absolutely not fire. They are either transport or emergency. We need to be placing equipment and looking at a GPS diagram of where the calls are happening. And so we place equipment and people in strategic locations, not necessarily in buildings. I think we need to rethink the entire process of providing emergency service to this city, as long as we've got the tourist traffic that we've got, because it is the single largest impediment. The fact that your former board member was proud of a 6-minute response time, which is 50% slower than the industry standard, is nothing to be proud of. But you're struggling because of the traffic. This town is not made for 3 million visitors a year. But we don't dare put another fire station up because of this traffic.
Okay, follow-up questions?
That's me. Okay, the finance director works annually with members of management to develop a budget to present to the board each spring. As a board member, how do you see yourself being effective in the budget process?
Kind of covered that in the very first one. I think the fact is a single year budget doesn't do any good. You got to be looking at that budget versus not prior year budgets, but prior year actuals. What did we actually spend in the succeeding 5 prior years? What were the drivers of that? I know one of the biggest issues, because I've been asked to look into it by legislators in this district, is the PSPRS problem that all of the districts have gotten. Even to the extent I've met with legislators over in Prescott, because Prescott had to actually raise their city sales tax to cover this, and I'm just waiting for that bomb to drop here. These are the kind of issues that need to be addressed, and I feel that I have in my business career, both as in budgets and running a $2 billion investment portfolio, I've actually offered to join the PSPRS board to Governor Ducey. I'm still waiting to hear. But this is a fundamental issue, not just for this district, but for this state. And it's gonna end up on the back of the taxpayers if we don't start fixing it. And when the chief tells me it's not, he can't do a thing about it, he can absolutely do a thing about it. Every time we hire a new person, it adds to the pension liability. But specifically in response, you need to look at trends. You need to look at comparisons. You cannot draw, as a board member, a realistic decision on a budget just looking at a snapshot in time from the finance director. I would want to spend a lot of time with that, with the director, with management, understanding the history, where we've come from, as well as looking forward. I think one of the shortcomings of this board is we look at year by year. I've already done a lot of analysis on what I think is reasonable budget levels out forward projecting, strategic planning. I don't see any of that being done. Looking at 2, 3, 4, 5 years out, what can we tell the citizens to expect? People are leaving Sedona because of the traffic and the taxes. Now, if you're coming from California, they're coming in here from California because of traffic and taxes, so I understand that. But people who've been here for a long time, this has become a tourist town par excellence. And that's, for those of us who retired here, who want to make it our home, it's, in the last 6 years that I've been here, it's not been fun.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Might you have any local or outside involvement with individuals, businesses, or agencies which could be considered a conflict of interest, nepotism, etc., with your functioning on the SFD Fire Board?
Okay, we learned during the bond process that there is support for the district from the residents. How would you go about garnering further support and making that support known to the public? I think Tony hit the nail on the head. I don't think the taxpayers supported this bond issue. It went down because what the taxpayers saw was excess spending. The threats, the veiled threats of cutting services, all of that did not sit well with taxpayers. There is a taxpayer revolution going on in this country today. Enough is enough, and I think to explain and I think it's a board. I don't think it's the chief's responsibility. I actually think it's your responsibility as chairman of the board to get out in front of Kiwanis and Rotary and people and groups like that and community groups and explain and help push out the information so that people want to be part of it. Because I think a lot of people were surprised when we began to realize that the vast majority of the calls are for emergency services. They're not for fire. We always talk this as a fire. This is really an emergency services district. That's what this really is. And I think right now there needs to be a reach out to the community by the board, a transparency. It's a overused word. I will grant you that. But I think the fact is people look at a lot of people don't even look at their tax bill. And why do I say that? Because if they have a mortgage and they have an escrow account, the escrow agent is paying, or a mortgage servicer is paying that bill. And what do? They get it in the mail and they throw it in the tax file. They never look at it. I did not realize that my own tax bill in the 6 years I've lived here, just for the fire district, had gone up 115% until I started pulling out the numbers. Just so happened I do my own taxes, and so I had all that documentation. And I'm going, what in the world? And then we start looking at the district, roughly the same number of people. In fact, maybe a slightly fewer people. Same general district, except I'm now paying $1,200 a year instead of less than $600. For what? And I think a lot of people ask the same question.
So I think it's responsible for us to not only put out to the community what the money's being spent for, but how do we compare to other areas? Whether it's central Yavapai, whether it's, whether it's, there are districts within, there's 155, 158 fire districts in the state of Arizona. The finance director ought to be doing a comparative analysis and giving it to the board and say, how does Sedona stack up? And I would not accept the thing, well, we're different. Don't ever say that. We're different. This is, as Mike Schrader said, this is a service business. There are revenues coming in, there are costs going out. There's nothing really special about it. And as Tony said, a lot of people are very irritated when they see engines and ambulances running in Weber's parking lot, when literally the station is, I could spit from the station into the parking lot at Weber's, or at Bash's, or at Safeway. And the comment about the 100-foot ladder truck, that ladder truck can't get around 60% of the neighborhoods in this town, and we spent $1 million on it. And then it went, what I do understand is that it went out of service because there were structural issues with it. This is the kind of thing that upsets the taxpayer. So we need to understand as board members, and that's what I want to do. I have an engineering background and a finance degree. I have a combination that I think could be very useful in evaluating this and helping make the Sedona Fire District an efficient, effective, cost-effective organization.
Okay.
Okay, Dwight. Question 6. Community risk management oversees both the fire marshal and fire inspector's duties, as well as the public education activities in our community. Our efficiencies in CRM have increased over the last year. However, there are further efforts needed in inspections and public education. How important is fire prevention in the scope of fire district core services?
I don't think it's particularly important at all. When the fact is that 70 plus, 75% are EMS and transport services. I think some of the comments that were made about getting volunteers to go around and check smoke detectors and things like that. But in terms of, we don't have enough fires. And the fires we have generally, whatever it is, it burns to the ground for the handful that we have. This is an emergency services district. That's where we need to focus, to be able to respond to an aging community in as quick response time as we can. And putting assets out strategically so that when the call comes in, 4 minutes is the tops that we ought to be shooting for, not something that would be nice to have. And working through with the city, with the planners, the idea of there's additional hotel rooms being contemplated for this town. There's a real problem here. And at the end of the day, what we absolutely don't want is somebody dying on one of our roads inside an ambulance because we can't get them to the hospital.
Okay. Sedona Fire first responders have worked hard since 1978 to provide EMS services to the members of the Sedona community. Medical transports today result in significant income to the Sedona Fire District. There has been discussion about privatizing or outsourcing the medical transports. What is your position on the matter?
I fully endorse the idea of doing competitive analysis. I think I look at that as one of those things is, I know Guardian up in Flagstaff, and I think as I recall from discussions with former board members that this has been looked at. I think it's time to relook at it. I know it's not a popular idea with the fire unions. They want more and more, as Tony said. But the fact of the matter is that we, the board, you, have an obligation to continually analyze the best way to provide that service. And since it is such a large component of what this organization does, I think it is absolutely the right time to evaluate that again. The idea of, and again, setting up, you would have to look at firm contracts, you'd have to be, again, validating districts within Arizona where these various service providers, where these contract service providers, to look at response times. I hear stories, well, they're just not qualified like we are. I beg to differ. The people in these contract EMS services are every bit as qualified as the people that work in this district. So I think it's absolutely the right thing to do, and we, the board, need to take a hard look at it.
Thank you.
Where is the current budget and anticipated 2019 budget both include funds set aside for future capital expenses? We're aware that a more aggressive capital funding plan is needed. How would you budget for that expense while maintaining current service level?
First thing I would do is, and again, if I heard your question right, you're anticipating future needs, which sounds to me like the budget is to include a building of a reserve for future to be spent in future years. That's if I understand what your question referred to. And I think it's appropriate to weigh off setting up that reserve. I think that's part of the problem that has been identified with where we are today. There was spending that continued to be done even though the assessed value in the district dropped. I didn't see any decline in salaries. The fact is again, looking at it on a competitive basis. How are our fire district, how is the salaries of our fire district first responders, our administrative staff? Are there things that are being done administratively that should be outsourced, like human resources? Those are the kind of things you can contract out. I think as a board member, it behooves each board member to consistently challenge the staff and management to find the best solution. And the best solution isn't just throwing more money at it. This country has got a bad habit of doing that, and we're coming to a day of reckoning. So the fact of the matter is I think at this point, to be quite candid, I would put a salary hiring freeze. I would put a salary freeze. I'd explain to the employees, it's time to tighten the belt. We need to set money aside for future capital expenses. So you have a choice. If you don't like that, there are other opportunities, for you somewhere else in Arizona, because I know, according to the statistics that were said publicly, 3 out of every 4 employees of the district don't even live in the district or pay taxes in the district. So the fact of the matter is, I think it's time for belt tightening, for a budget, a salary freeze, and figure out a way to hold the line on those, and because you're probably going to get a 5% increase, probably 5 to 5.5% increase in the assessed district, the assessed value of the district, automatically. That's roughly speaking, that would give probably another $1.5 million just through that, with no other change in the mill rate. Begin to set that aside with a spending plan, but not a spending plan for lifestyle enhancements, like new kitchens. Let's talk about what really needs to be done, or $600,000 pumper trucks down in the village. Let's talk about what really needs to be done.
Okay, this position's up for election in November of 18. If selected, would you consider campaigning to maintain your seat in the upcoming election?
I would.
Okay.
Okay, Dwight, last question.
Okay.
Why do you feel you would be the most qualified candidate for this board position?
I think I bring a passion that perhaps has been lacking over the years in doing the work of the advocate, as an advocate for the taxpayers. We have to have a board, and whether it's this board, I was on a number of not-for-profit boards where, again, we're accepting, not taxpayer money, but donations. And I had a fiduciary obligation to squeeze the most out of it. I've done that in my business career. I understand how that works. I know the kinds of questions asked. I know how to challenge the staff and management. I'll give you a great example. We've got two inactive stations. Should we reactivate those? Should we sell the properties? Who's asking those kinds of questions? I don't see those being asked by this board or any boards in the past, quite candidly. There has to be a way to challenge the staff and management to say, is this the best we can do? Let's put some fresh thinking in. I can provide some fresh thinking into this board that I think will be beneficial both to the fire district and to the taxpayers.
Okay. That wraps up our 10 questions.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So we're gonna go ahead and take a recess so board members can put their thoughts together, and then we'll come back to session in a little bit and announce our top 3, and then the board will go into discussions. Stop the recording. We'll be recessed.